Really exciting to be partnering with ITT for the first time with the new writing program. A lot of you have probably heard about so many things that are happening with the new writing program with our brand new courses, Writing 1, 2, and 3. But today we're here to help make your lives easier. I assume that's why you take time out of your life to come to a workshop like this, is to try and find some great tips and shortcuts and ways of, again, making your life easier when you're offering feedback to students. And then my job is to help you do that in ways that are pedagogically savvy, and Mike is going to speak into the technological side. So we're hoping that this is just going to be smooth sailing for you. You're going to get a lot of great tips and things that you can use when that stack of papers comes in and you just feel a little bit, I'm not going to say how you feel, but I know how I feel when I get a stack of papers. It can be a real challenge. So our first tip today is right on that topic. We're going to talk about what kinds of feedback do you like to get, and then we're going to get into how to manage the grading load. So I would just love to hear from you when you write something or when you've written things in the past. What kinds of feedback did you like getting from whomever you were giving your writing to? You like to hear what you did right, and nothing else, right?
Well, Ed likes to start with that.
I like to start with that too. Absolutely. Good. What else? Specific feedback. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Good. Others? Go ahead.
What's missing, maybe to get a better grade?
What's missing? So what do you need to do to get a better grade? Absolutely. Go ahead, Rich.
I'm thinking of submitting a paper to the journal. I like actionable suggestions of things I can practically do.
Actionable suggestions, things that you see it and you know what to do next, and you're not confused by, et cetera. Good, good. I think your students like the exact same kinds of things. They like to know what they did well. They like to know what their next steps are, what's actionable. How to get a better grade is, of course, their goal, right? Our secret goal is to teach them along the way to become better writers, but all of these things are really important. And I would just love to ask from you, from your teaching side, from your teaching perspective, what do you think is the purpose of your feedback on writing? I'm sure there are many, but what are a couple of those purposes? To help them improve. Okay, good. Anything else?
An honest answer is so they can know why they didn't get an A.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the honest answer. Absolutely. I think that's a huge part of why we write on our papers, right? So that when they say, wait, I didn't get an A, it's right there in black and white. Here's why you didn't. You're kind of defending your grade in some ways, right? Good. So are we okay with those two answers? To help them improve, but also to defend our grades. Yeah, really important. Okay, let's go ahead. So managing the grading load. I think that's what we're all trying to do day in and day out. We have a lot on our plate. So how can we manage the grading load? So I've got a few tips for you. I'm going to be working off of this handout here. Mine's in color, yours isn't, but you'll get the idea. So I'd just love to hear from you. How much time do you spend responding to student writing? And you can do that per paper, per stack. Do you feel, or percentage of your time? I'm just wondering, for you guys, if it's a huge amount of time. Emily, what do you think? It's a huge amount of time. We're talking days. Yeah, it's just ongoing. Good. Others? Do you feel like this is just an ongoing task? It's a Sisyphean struggle, or is this something that you do occasionally and it's not a huge task? I'm just trying to figure out how much writing you have in your classes.
And dissertations.
Dissertations is overwhelming. Good. A lot. Okay. So as a group, we have a lot. Which aspects of writing feedback do you think take the most time for you?
When something's very disorganized.
Okay, when you're trying to help them organize. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
We're still constantly spending time on grammar, mechanics,
Yeah,
all those things.
Going through and marking up the paper for all those commas and things like that takes a lot of time. Yeah, good. Anything else?
Move beyond superficial.
Yes, digging into the actual what were they saying and how are they saying it? That's a lot harder in some ways. Yeah, good. Okay, good. I'm getting a good feel for how we're approaching this. So the first tip I would give you in terms of managing the grading load is to focus on 2 to 3 things that you want students to learn. And this is in some ways, when I started doing this, it was hugely freeing to me. Because I think at first we feel like we need to teach them everything that they could ever need to know about writing on this draft. And you need to show them everything that they did wrong. for a couple of reasons, right? First, if I don't say you did this wrong, they might think that they did it right, right? Which is really worrisome. If I don't mark, that your commas are in the wrong place, how will they learn, right? That's what my dad always said when he was driving. He would glare at people and he would say, how else will they learn, right? It's a technique, right? And so we feel like if I don't say every single thing that's incorrect on this paper, then they're going to think that those things are correct, which is not always the case. But if you can start to limit yourself to, thinking about what's the objective of this assignment, right? Hopefully there is one. That's the first step. And then what are the 2 to 3 things that I want them to learn on this assignment or on this draft? Which is another really important point, because if we scaffold our assignments and we have them spread out over time, we're going to have a lot more success in terms of writing instruction, because we'll have more opportunities to speak into what they're doing. So what I try to do is spread out an assignment over a matter of time. In the first draft, I'm looking at specific things, like what are the 2 to 3 things I want them to learn on this draft? I want them to learn how to write a thesis statement. I want them to learn how to introduce paper. I want them to learn how to organize, let's say. So then I would tell them that's what I'm looking at for this draft, and I wouldn't mark anything else, if that makes sense. So already I'm free from not having to mark all of the commas and all of that because I've been explicit. I'm not saying that these things are great, but I'm ignoring them for this draft because, let's be honest, if you get feedback on something and you have 20 different things that they're trying to tell you, it's overwhelming and you're not probably going to learn 20 things, right? In fact, you might not learn any things because it's so overwhelming. So the research shows that if we focus on 2 to 3 things, they're actually going to be much more likely to learn one thing than if we try to tell them 10 things and they don't learn anything, okay? And it's a lot less work for you. So that's the secret side bonus. Grammar mechanics, so I mentioned the how will they learn aspect. It's so important. People feel like, we have to, how will they learn? If I don't tell them about grammar and mechanics, how will they learn? I would just point out that you have to think about what is the intention for this assignment, right? What's my objective? Is grammar and mechanics one of your objectives for the assignment? Then definitely you want to give them that feedback. But at the same time, is it worth going through and marking every comma? Probably not, and we'll talk more about that later on. What do you do when your editor says, comma here, comma here, comma here? You go through and put the commas there, right? But do you think about why they belong there? I can tell you, maybe you do, but your students certainly don't. Right? They just go through and put the comma there because they want to know how to get a better grade. So if we're focused on learning, then putting commas in for our students is not helping them learn, okay? And we'll talk more about that. But the idea then is to think about what am I focused on, and then if you need to give them instruction on grammar and feedback, we'll talk more about that, but you can give them handouts from the Writing Center, you can send them to the Writing Center, you can talk about patterns, etc. And the other managing the grading load tip I'm going to give right now is using rubrics as a grading tool. You guys, how many of you use rubrics? Do you find that helps with your grading time? If a student just looks at, what's an A paper, it says explicitly, it's organized in these ways. It has this, it has a thesis that does these things. And then when I go through and it's just final feedback, I can just circle, okay, you're here or you're here, and the column tells them exactly what they need to know, and I don't need to write it all out, which saves a lot of time. We talked about scaffolding assignments. The other thing I would say about that, if you're scaffolding assignments and you're bringing in drafts early on, I tend to grade those quantitatively, not qualitatively, which people always say, wait, don't you mean that the other way around? But the early drafts, I'm grading, did you do it? Check, you get full credit, because I want them to know that they can make mistakes and that they can have a messy first draft, that when I write a first draft, it's really messy, and that I'm not grading it for quality the way that I would a final paper. I'm grading it for quantity, right? Check, and then I'm giving them feedback on the 2 to 3 things I want them to learn, and that feedback is looking toward their next draft, which we'll talk more about. Mike, did you want to show them more about this app, or should I talk about the next thing?
I will talk. So what I'm using right now is Google Docs. This is part of the Google Suite that's available to everyone at APU. I recognize that some of you may not be using Google Docs in your classroom for a variety of reasons, but I just want to sort of demonstrate this to show you some of the features for feedback that really is I think, really beneficial if you want to speed up and also be more effective in your grading. So what I've done is you can have your students submit the paper as a Microsoft Office Word document to Sakai, and what you do is you just download it and you can sort of upload it to Google, or you can have them submit it as a Google document directly to you. And we can we don't have time today to go through all the specifics of how to set up, but our office is more than happy to sit down with you if you want to sort of pursue Google document as a part of sort of your workflow. But what I want to highlight here is, so this basic essay was started in Word, and I just uploaded it to my drive, and it converted it and allowed me to then start doing things like these comments. So you just highlight the paragraph that you want, or the sentence, or whatever part, and then you just do a little add comment. So please check for error, or whatever it is that you want to say. And the nice thing about this is that they can go in and then respond to those individual comments that you're providing them. And so you have a thread of all the different kind of going back and forth that you typically don't get when you're trying to help your students revise paper. And what I was trying to demonstrate while Rebecca was talking about how I had two main points in my feedback here. My first is in the first part where I was trying to ask the student, like, which part of the prompt are you trying to focus on in this essay? Because sometimes that's typically if you have a very robust essay prompt, and sometimes they don't know which part they're focusing on, and just having them focus on one helps them to kind of, when they do the revision, they can think about, okay, which part am I trying to answer? And then the other part I was trying to provide is at the end, did you intend to end your paper with this conclusion, even though it's some lorem, which is this filler language for programmers. But the idea is you're trying to focus on a very few limited points as opposed to trying to comment on everything that they're saying.
Yeah.
And then one last thing I want to say about Google Document is once you are done, you can actually download this as a Word document or a PDF or any other version that's available here, and you can then kick it back. Or if you are using Google Document as part of your workflow in your class, then when you're done, they will have direct access. I mean, they will be able to actually see your comment as you're making them if they were on the same on the document at the same time. So.
All right, let's talk about giving feedback early and often. We talked a little bit about scaffolding assignments and spreading them out over time. This can be done in a lot of different ways, but the idea is that even if you're not collecting it, you can give them opportunities to bring in a draft early on, and for them to engage with that, whether it's a peer workshop, even if it's just bringing it in and saying, I've done this much, and you're like, great job. Okay, now take it back and revise it. They'll be annoyed, but they'll have already done all of that work versus waiting until the night before, right? And that's a huge difference. I think most professors tend to focus most of their feedback energy on the final paper, right? Do you feel that? That for you it's, they've written some drafts and then you collect that final paper and you spend days responding to it. Not you. Some of you, I'm getting some nods and some shakings of heads, so this is going to be for half of you. The more that we can focus on those early drafts as a place where we give feedback, the more students are going to learn about how to improve their writing. I think when we give comments on the final paper, it's more about covering, this is why I gave this grade. It's about explaining it, kind of supporting what we got across. But it's not focusing on transferability of skills to the next writing situation. They tend not to read what we write on their final papers because they're mostly interested in the grade, right? And there's been a lot of research into that. So personally, I don't write anything on final papers. I don't spend any time commenting on them at all, which is shocking to some of you. I collect them and I grade them, but I've seen them before and I've given feedback along the way. And that's where I think they do more of their learning. So I collect, for instance, I'll collect a one-page paper plan at the very beginning of the process where I'm saying, what's your plan? What's your tentative thesis? What are you trying to get across? And I give a lot of feedback on that because that's an opportunity for me to course correct before they've written 20 pages that are totally off topic, right? And their first draft, I'll maybe do a conference with them and sit down with them, that sort of thing. And then when I give them feedback on those things along the way, I'm saying things like, for your next draft, try this, right? And then that's where they're still trying to get that better grade, and they're motivated, and they want to know what I want them to do. After they've gotten the grade, the motivation is gone. And they don't see how it connects to any future writing assignments, and they don't know why they should change anything. They just want to know what their grade is. So for me, I'm really focused on those early drafts or drafts along the way, because that's where I've still got their attention, right? And again, I don't write anything on those final papers at all. I collect them, I read them pretty quickly because I've read them along the way, and I give them a grade, and it's done. I just put it in Sakai, and then I recycle them. I don't even give them back unless they want them, which is great because it's Christmas and I want to go shopping. So, and I think that they learn more earlier on in the process. So front-loading feedback is my main tip for you there, and then focusing on the next writing situation. Even if you're writing on those final papers, you can write things like, the next time you write a research paper, try this, this, and this. And that's because the research shows that they're not making connections between writing situations. They don't see how this paper relates to the paper they write for Dr. Jones, right? They think that they're just two people who want two totally different things. But if you can just be really explicit about, this is a research paper, maybe you wrote something similar in this other class, and you're using those same sorts of skills, and then say things like, the next time you write something like this, focus on your organization. You need to you organize differently or whatever it is. But then that directing to the future is going to help them see that they need to keep moving forward rather than just finding the grade and not understanding why they got it. Even if you've written pages on why they got it, they don't necessarily get it.
So you can see I embedded a grading rubric, which is, and once you are, like I said, once you're done, you can actually just export it as a PDF, and then the students, if you don't want the students to interact with this, you just sort of lock it down and return it as a PDF. But if you are going to allow students to be able to interact with this, then there are ways to kind of, so there's some share functions here that I want to just quickly show you where when you share it with a student, you have the ability to limit them to, well, you limit to only the student that you want, but more than that, you can have them view only or comment only so that they're not changing what your comments are. So that they don't sort of, after the fact, after the deadline, they're changing their essay. So you would lock it down. And the only thing they can do is either view your comments or they can comment on what you've commented. Does that make sense? So it's part of the permission function of every document. So it's just, when you click on share on the top right corner, you'll have this window which allows you to see what kind of permissions you give. So, but it's a really powerful tool. I mean, we can spend probably a couple of hours on Google Doc, and we still wouldn't be able to cover other features. But we'll move on.
Great. So the next tip is on responding to the writer and not the writing, which is, again, one of these things that seems a little counterintuitive. But we're talking about, this is in the Writing Center. We've used this photo a lot of different places because we love it. Because this is what we do in the Writing Center. We have conversations with students. People tend to think that they come in and we write on their papers and hand it back to them. But actually, we are talking to them about the process. Our lovely director is here, Jody Fernando. And so it's a really exciting experience that they come in and they're getting feedback in a verbal, conversational way. And we can't do that with all of our students all of the time. Would that we could, but we just don't have that kind of time in our schedules. But even when we're responding to student writers in writing, we can respond to them as people rather than just responding to what they've written down. So I've given some examples here of things that we often see on writing. Things like awk, like the AWK, which stands for awkward, which students don't necessarily understand. But that we can respond, we can change to something like, Tasha, I found this sentence a little bit hard to understand, right? Or whatever it is. And it's what I thought, not this is awkward. And everyone who ever reads this is going to think this is awkward, and that's just the way it is. It's my response to you as a writer. And here, maybe you could rephrase it this way, or whatever it is, but giving feedback to that person. The other thing that, again, students find it really hard to get through is the idea of just good. They'll see, like, in the margin, good, right? Or check mark. And they don't understand what that means. What's good? The topic, the way that it's written, the quote that I used, and they don't even know which line it's referring to all the time. And they start to feel like the professor is just going through and writing good randomly in the column, which I've done that, let's be honest. Okay. We got to get through. But if we can instead say things like, Cindy, I really appreciated this. Or I appreciate this, or this is, I've had this experience, or I've struggled with this, or whatever it is. But again, it's going to be very different for each subject. But responding to the student makes them feel heard and makes them feel understood, and helps with your idea scores in the end as well. Confusing is another one. So this is not generally confusing. It's not confusing maybe to every person in the whole world. But if you can just say in a relational way with the student, I found this confusing. Could you clarify this? Could you add an extra point? I wasn't sure what you meant. They're going to be a lot more responsive to that sort of thing. And the thing that we hear over and over again when I ask students about feedback is that it hurts them, I think, almost physically when professors go through and cross things out. They can't stand it, right? So, but it's hard because we want to. It's like, this has nothing to do with what we're doing, X, that sort of thing. So instead of crossing out, even just bracketing, and then writing something like, try without this, or, right? It's a little change, but this was not as helpful, or this feels out of place, or to me, etc. So the crossing out is really tough on our students. So how can we think about who we're responding to, respond to that person? And it can be a letter at the end, or it can be throughout, but again, responding to the person and not just the writing is a huge step. And it feels small, but it makes a big difference. In terms of starting with global feedback, we've touched a little bit on grammar. This is from the Writing Center. The idea is the 10 writing priorities. Actually, Diana Glyer, one of our professors from the English department, developed it. And she's created this hierarchical list of priorities for writing, which is really helpful when you're offering feedback on student writing because it reminds you what to focus on first and what is less important. And it's hierarchical in terms of importance. So thesis is at the top. What is the message of this paper? Who is the audience that you're trying to approach? What is the genre? All right? Are you following the conventions of this genre? So if you're writing a lab report, is it a lab report, or have you written a poem, and that's not really going to work for this situation, okay? So you can actually use this. You can give this to them before they turn in their final draft and have them go through it and answer the questions. Or you can use this when you're giving feedback to just remind yourself that you want to focus on the first things first, especially in early drafts. You want to focus on, do they have a thesis? Are they approaching their audience correctly? Are they staying within the conventions of the genre? Do they have evidence to support their message? And is it organized? Okay, that's the top 5. These are what I would call the global things that you would give feedback on. The sentence level feedback is what we tend to go to immediately because we're really comfortable with it and because it's right or wrong. So most professors feel comfortable going through and adding commas or crossing things out or doing those sentence level things, but it's actually not the critical thinking engagement that's going to help them with their learning overall. And again, it's not really going to help them become better writers because you're just copy editing for them. You're becoming a better copy editor, but they're not becoming a better writer, okay? So if we focus on global first and then get into sentence level feedback, but then how do we do sentence level feedback if we're not going to go through and copy edit? So a couple of things. We're going to do patterns and examples. So what I would do is maybe point out 1 or 2 examples, right? So you tend to be missing a comma after your introductory element. Here's an example right here. You need a comma right here. And then I'm not going to mark this for the rest of the paper. Or I'll attach a handout to it from the Writing Center. Or I'll put a link to the PDF of the Writing Center in here. But I'll just say, this is a pattern I'm seeing in your writing. This is something you need to fix for your next draft. Go to the Writing Center if you need help with it. But I'm not going to go through and mark all of those because, again, they're just going to put them in, but they're not going to learn how to improve that element, okay? And it's a waste of your time. Oh, it's so much time going through and editing for them. So don't do that anymore, okay? If you are desperate and you have to copy edit something, focus on 1 paragraph, or 1 page, or just do the front page. Again, I would say just a couple of examples is fine. But if you can just talk about patterns, I've noticed that your subject-verb agreement is often off. If you don't know what this means, go to the Writing Center and they'll help you with it. This is a release. I've given you permission to not mark commas ever again. Congratulations. And instead, to just mention patterns and maybe an example or two. Questions? Does that feel good? Yeah? Yeah. It's not helping them anyway, so it's not worth it. And the other thing you can do is you can come to the Writing Center and get a stack of our handouts and just staple it to the draft if you're refining that way, or put the PDF on the draft, and just put the link right there, and then check. You let them know. You've put them on notice. This is something I expect for the next draft, but that you don't have to go through and mark it. Good. Do you want to jump in?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm demoing here is a web-based application called Kami, K-A-M-I. It's listed on your handout in the back. And you can use this offline, so you don't even have to have an internet connection, like what I was doing during Rebecca's talk. And it does very similar things that you saw in the Google Doc, except this one allows you to, it's really meant for more PDF-based. I use this sometimes for like when I'm reading an article and I'm trying to annotate it. But if the PDF-based kind of grading that you're trying to do, let's say, it can be if you teach a class where you're asking for, let's say, a poster as an assignment. And sometimes it's hard to kind of grade those non-Microsoft Word documents. This is a great tool because all you do really is you select what you want as what kind of annotation tool, and then you sort of drop that onto the spot that you want, and you start making comments. So it's really it's great to play with some of these annotation tools, and it gives you almost all the things that you need to comment. And again, since you're not doing at the sentence level, the word level editing, this tool allows you to not have to worry about that kind of detail, because it gives you things like strikeout and underline and highlighting, but it's not going to allow you to actually change as if you were in Word and you're trying to add a comma and do the spacing and things like that. So just another tool to consider, Kami. So.
Question.
Yes.
You may have mentioned this and I just missed it. How does the student receive that back? What does it look like for them?
So basically, this works the same way as the Google document. You can export it any way you want. You can export it. Most of it is going to be in PDF because I started as a PDF, and it will link. Either you can download to your computer or you can send it back up to your Google Drive folder if you set up one for your class. But the annotations allow you to. You can choose no annotation, annotation on top, annotation on the side, or annotations only. So it's a really nice set of features. Again, this is really best for PDF-based papers or PDF documents, whether it's like visuals, like some of you might teach I don't know if anybody teaches visual design or product or marketing that requires some visual aspects of sort of in the paper. This is a great way to do that kind of commenting.
Mm-hmm.
So. Other questions about Kami?
It's nice because everybody now has a different word, or they are all using different, pages, and they're not all compatible.
Yes.
So if you just say upload everything in PDF, and then you're doing more global feedback, you're not getting into the nitty-gritty because I've just given you permission to not do that again. So then that is really conducive to that, to Kami. So that works well. So let's talk a little bit about metacognition and helping the writer to think about what they're doing during the process in order to help them to learn throughout the process. So you brought up the question of, do you have them write about what they've written or assess what they've written? And I do in a few different ways. One of the things I've done, I mentioned paper plans, having them think ahead of time about what they're planning to do and responding to that. I often do things like 1-minute presentations in class, and that could be at any point during the writing process. Okay, we're halfway to the due date for this paper. Today we're doing 1-minute presentations to just say where you're at, how you've done on finding resources, or because I want to hear about how you're organizing your paper, or whatever aspect it is that you want to hear from your students, at different points in the semester, which, let's be honest, they've probably forgotten they even have anything due. So if you can remind them about that and make them stand up for a minute and talk about it, it's great. So that's really helpful. I also do a lot of reverse outlines. So I have my students write a draft and then outline it after they've written it and assess, how is this working? Are there gaps in my argument? Are there places where I'm repeating the same idea in paragraph 4 and paragraph 7? Do I need to cut this because it doesn't go with my main topic anymore? Am I not supporting it at all? So they've written a draft and I have them outline it either in the margin or in a separate piece of paper and assess how it's working from a more of a zoomed out perspective, which works really well for them. I also have my students write author's notes. I have them write one for every draft, and I have them write a cover letter for their final portfolio or final project. And the author's note really is just, here's my thesis. This is the audience that I'm trying to write this for. This is the message that I'm trying to get across. Here's how I think this is working so far, and here are the problems I'm having with it. Here are the questions I have. And then I know when I read that what to give feedback on, because they've asked me specifically what they need feedback on, and I can respond directly to that letter. So it's a letter to me or a letter to their peer group if they're meeting with their peer group, and I respond to that specifically. And then on the day of submission, I like to do all sorts of fun things with them. But they've brought their 12-page paper or their 15-page paper, which they're so sick of and they want to get rid of. And I say, get it out, okay? And I make them read it again. And they hate that. They really don't like it at all. But I say, get out a pen and read your paper and mark any errors you see, any mistakes. If there's a place where there's something missing or if there's something that's off, go ahead and mark that for me. And they're like, but it's the final paper. This is the final paper. And I'm like, well, yeah, you probably should have done this last night, but but there's still mistakes in it, right? And there's still things and it's just a really huge moment for them because they're like, oh, yeah, I should have made these changes before. But I'll say, okay, I'm going to count all that as if it's part of your final paper. I messed up, exactly. Or I'll have them take the paper and turn it over and then write, if I had had 3 more days, here are the things that I would have done to this paper. Or just any kind of, this is what I'm thinking at this point. And that shows me what they know that they shouldn't have turned this in without a conclusion, right? Or whatever it is. And then I don't need to spend much time commenting on that because they are already aware of it, right? Little dears. Yeah. But those sorts of activities just help them to think through that process and be aware of what's happening. I mean, in my class, so I'm teaching, like I mentioned, writing 1, we do a lot of talking about, what are your writing rituals? Where do you go to write? What's your process look like? How does your process vary when you're writing a Facebook post from when you're writing a research paper? Hopefully it's different, that sort of thing. But just getting them to think about their process is also really helpful. Okay, it's all you, Mike.
Okay. So what I've done is I switched over to my iPad. So this is an app called Annotate, and that's one of the 2 apps we're raffling off today. It's a $10 app, so it's actually a very good value. And what you can do is, as I showed earlier, you can do, I'm using a stylus, or you can just use your finger and you can make comments there. But one of the things about global comments and also about metacognition is this little cool ability to add audio. So imagine I used to do a lot of paper, and then towards sort of the latter part of my teaching, I started moving to audio feedback, which was like, it saved me time, but it was more impactful than ever. I mean, it was just kind of surprising because couple of the comments I got was that when I did an audio feedback, they felt like that I cared about them more. The fact that they heard my voice and I was commenting, and also they felt like the fact beyond being personable, they found it a lot more effective because I was able to contextualize something that was harder to do when I was writing. Because oftentimes when you're writing feedback and you have 50 papers, you're not going to, trying to compose your little feedback, and it's going to take some time. So talking is the fastest way to do input. And so this is an app where you can do that. So what I'm going to do is tap on this little audio, and I just tap on anywhere on the page, and there's a recording. So testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So when I stop that, there's that little, let me play play it back to you. Let me see if it'll.
And it's recording. So testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
So when I export this as a regular PDF, they can play it without any special application. So if you have a PDF reader, it will actually play that file. And you can have as many of these as you want throughout the paper. I mean, you can have, instead of marking anything, you just talk it through. So here's your second mistake on the bottom of page 1. Please revise. And then you can do that. So you can drop these audio comments throughout, or you can just drop one at the very end and say, I read your paper. I found it very interesting. Please focus on X, Y, and Z. All right, so let me switch gear a little bit here and talk about the remaining tool that, maybe I won't need to show it on the screen. So on the back here, I've listed a lot more applications than I had time to actually demonstrate. So there's your Microsoft Word, which has track change. A lot of you are familiar with that. You can definitely use that. There's Adobe Acrobat, has a lot of the annotation features as well as the audio. So you can actually use the Acrobat to do audio feedback as well. But if you only have sort of the reader version, which is the free version, then that's a lot more limited in terms of annotation. You can't do audio. You can do like highlighting and you can do comments, but you need the full Acrobat version. And most of you, I think, should have that on your laptop. If not, go contact IMT. And then I demonstrated Google Doc, Cami. Notability, I didn't get a chance to show you, but it's very similar to Annotate. It allows you to do very similar kinds of audio, text, freehand kinds of commenting on any document, any image. I mean, it's really, it's not just for PDFs, but you can do images. And there's also another one I didn't include here called Explain Everything, which allows you to even annotate videos. So as you're watching a video, you can annotate the video, which is pretty amazing. And then TurnItIn is, if you use the online version of TurnItIn as opposed to the integration with Sakai, it gives you this ability to do grading directly on their site. And you can build your rubric there. I mean, it's really a robust tool. They also have, I believe only at this point, an iOS and Apple mobile app called GradeMark, which you can use on your tablet and your iPad, and you can do all the grading offline, and then when you're done, it'll upload to the cloud, and students will get back the paper. And then AudioBoom is the last one that I didn't get to. But what we'll do is distribute this electronically as well to you after today, so that all these are hyperlinks to the tutorials, to resources, so you can explore more at your own leisure. And then in addition, on the front, Rebecca has also hyperlinked each of these major points that she's made to the writing program website, as well as, I don't know if you have other resources beyond that.
Yeah, I just want to mention there's apu.edu/go/writing, which is the new writing program website. And it has all sorts of information on this topic, offering feedback on student writing, including links to a lot of PDFs and just more information. You could just spend weeks and weeks learning about offering feedback on student writing, as well as how to help with grammar, how to manage the grading load. There's a lot of different elements that are expanded on there, and information on writing 1, 2, and 3, which are new courses. So if you're interested in those, which I'm sure you are, you can learn more about that too. There's also writing program booklets on the back. And the other book, I just wanted to highlight this one's really excellent. It's Responding to Student Writers. It's about 80 pages long, nice and slim, and it has tons of great information on just not only how to help students receive the information. So it focuses on not just what to say, but how to help them actually learn from it and absorb it, because we can say things all day long, but are they actually going to learn from it? And there's a lot of great research backing it up, and so this is one I really strongly recommend.
So I forgot to highlight this one feature in Annotate I really like.
Brown, red.
It's called stamp. So you can do things like arrows, check marks, You can do things like excellent. I'm going to do excellent stamp. I know you're not supposed to do that sometimes. You could also do happy faces. Let me see if I can put it. I haven't. You can do sad faces. You can do good job. You can do letter grade. So it's a stamp, so you can put all throughout. It's kind of like stickers. You can put stickers all over the paper. So.
Oh,
program is that from?
I annotate.
I annotate.
I annotate. So
I think just a good thing to remember, and with all of these, is that we as professors are so impactful, so much more than we think we are. And so if you write no on your student's paper, some of them will be totally fine with it, and some of them will need therapy. So just keep that in mind. Keep it in mind.
all right. So any other questions you guys have about either the best practices or in terms of the tech apps that we demonstrated?